My name is Sharath Patil, and I was born in Bangalore in India. And when I was a child, my family and we immigrated to the United States, and I grew up in southern Arizona. Currently, I'm a law student at the University of Oregon, and I'm in my final year. Currently, I'm spending my summer working here in Washington, D.C. I was born in 1993 in Bangalore in southern India. I grew up with my parents as well as my younger sister, and she's 4 years younger than me, and her name is Simran. Growing up, I moved around quite a bit, and I got used to that. It was partly because of what my parents did for a living, and it was interesting always being exposed to all these different cultures and constantly moving around a lot. It can feel a bit unstable, but at the same time, I think it helped me in understanding different perspectives and different lifestyles and values. When I was in Bangalore, I spent a lot of time with my extended family there, particularly my grandfather. And he and I had a very special relationship because he enjoyed sharing a lot of stories from different faith traditions with me early on when I was quite young. He was Hindu like the rest of my family, and even so, he would always talk about the oneness of religion. And in fact, they would have a prayer shrine at my grandparents' home, and they would have different icons from different faiths, which was actually not very common. I think I was 5 years old, so I was quite young, and I attended first grade in New Zealand in the city of Auckland. And it was a short stay that we had there. It was so different from a lot of the rest of the world. We got to explore a lot of the country during our time there. And we stayed there for about 2 years, and then we moved to the United States. My father is a mechanical engineer, and my mother's an electrical engineer. They're both been very supportive throughout my childhood and my interest in learning about the world, and I've always been drawn to learning about other cultures, and I've always enjoyed maps, and it was a bit of an obsession for me growing up, and I used to collect maps, and I had a lot of map puzzles and just learning about different countries and cultures, and so I was really grateful that they always brought me books about different countries. I really enjoyed going to the library, and reading was a very big part of my childhood as well as my sister's. So many summers we would just spend reading a lot and talking about different ideas and stories. Me and my sister are very close. She's a few years younger than me, and currently she attends the military academy at West Point. And it was wonderful growing up with her. We went on fairly different paths, but we're both really interested in international issues and diplomacy. And I'm really passionate about trade, while she's more interested in the foreign affairs aspects of it. Growing up, we actually used to cross into Mexico quite often just because it was almost the town next door. So oftentimes on a Saturday, we'd cross over the border and eat lunch, and it wasn't a big deal. It was just like going into town. And generally, I think our high school was characterized by people of very different cultural worldviews, and it was very special for me to try and understand how everyone saw the world. I did my undergraduate studies in business. One thing I was really interested in always was trade and how things are produced. It was really impressive to me how everything that we wear and eat and drive has a story. How something as simple as a pencil can involve, wood from Brazil and graphite from Indonesia and paint from China, and how thousands of people can come together and and create things, people who would never meet each other, and yet it all seems to work seamlessly. The study of that within business is called supply chain management and logistics, and that's something I studied through my undergraduate degree. I grew up in a Hindu tradition, but we weren't necessarily very spiritual in my household. Oftentimes we practiced some of the traditions that are important in Hinduism, but it wasn't necessarily very important. But I remember growing up just reading a lot of stories from different faith traditions. I was always very curious, and I thought when I go to college I'm going to learn about all these different faiths. And it was a really special time because it meant that I could go and visit different faith communities and places of worship. There was a Korean pastor at my university, and he had served there for a long time, and he did a lot of interfaith work as well as service projects. And we used to meet every single week all through my undergraduate studies, and I would just read and ask questions and compare his understanding of his faith with a lot of the other faiths that I was learning about. And he served a really important role in my life and continues to do so. And I just really appreciated learning how much each of the faiths have in common and how all of these different messengers really teach a lot of the same messages. And so this Korean pastor who was my mentor, he used to organize a lot of service projects. We adopted a park in the local neighborhood and worked with youth and had a lot of dialogue about different faith traditions. It all felt like it was one. It didn't feel like there were all these different faiths. It felt like that group of people was all one. And so I just had more and more questions. And so I had some time between my studies every summer, and I wanted to go and explore, and I was really drawn to the Middle East, particularly Israel, Palestine, only because it's so important, that region, to so many of the world's faiths, and I was also interested in the history and the geopolitics of that region. I got to spend 2 different summers in Israel and the Palestinian territories. First, I worked in a kibbutz in southern Israel, and our kibbutz was right next to the Gaza Strip. And a lot of my work was doing irrigation work and working on the farms outside of the community. And also, some other experiences I had just to really understand everyone's perspective was living in the West Bank, first in Bethlehem and then in Ramallah. And it was a very special time because it was kind of a spiritual journey in that I really went there to understand everything that I could firsthand, or as much as I could, about Christianity and Islam and Judaism. My kibbutz was right next to the Gaza Strip, and oftentimes I would lay like irrigation out on the fields, and it was right next to Gaza, about 1 kilometer away. And I could see Gaza on 3 sides, and it was very difficult because it seemed like a place of tremendous suffering, and it really felt closed off to me. And I remember as I was working out there on the fields, you would hear the call to prayer from Gaza, like that's how close we were, and yet I couldn't go. And things became tense in the middle of the summer, and we used to have rockets come over from Gaza in the middle of the night. And so we had 15 seconds to get to a bunker, and this siren would go off, and this woman's voice, and she would say over and over again, Seva Adom, which means red light, red light. throughout all that experience, I felt like I learned a lot, and yet I was really frustrated, just because it felt like the forces of division in our societies were so strong. One weekend, I was planning a trip for me and some friends who also lived on the kibbutz, and they were also young people like me who came from all over the world. And I had a friend who was from Germany, and she had a guidebook, and the guidebook was all in German. And I can't read any German, but I'm just flipping through the pictures to figure out where to go for the weekend. And in the centerfold of the Lonely Planet guidebook, there's a picture, and so I open it up, and it's the Baha'i Gardens. And I had never heard of the Baha'i faith before. But the gardens looked so beautiful that I told my friends that we have to go. That particular day when we went, I'm not sure if we took the wrong route or if it was the only path that day, but we walked up all the stairs. And I was so impressed and completely enamored. I was wondering, what is this place and who are these people? And so we climbed, and it was a hot summer day, and we were totally sweaty and gross when we got to the top, but the view was so incredible. And then to walk around the gardens, and I think it was the mystery of really like not having any background at all and walking around in this place that was obviously very reverential and special to a lot of the visitors, and yet not really knowing anything about it was a bit of a shock. So we visited the shrines, and then I got to talking to some of the volunteers who work there. And they gave me a very short introduction to the faith. They gave me some, but I remember hearing the message about the unity of humanity and the equality of all peoples and the oneness of religion. And it just felt so much like it was the complete opposite of the narrative of that entire region. And so I completed that summer there in that region and returned to school in Arizona State University. And fortunately that fall I had to take an elective in a world religions class. And so my professor required us to go visit any faith community that we don't know much about and learn more about them. And I was so impressed with everything about the Baha'i faith that I decided to look them up and see if there's any Baha'is in my area. And so I go on the website, and I remember going through the main website of the Baha'i International Community, and just seeing how it was like a checklist, and going through and seeing the equality of all peoples, the unity of humankind, the equality of the sexes, the elimination of extremes in wealth and poverty, environmental stewardship. It was just yes and yes and yes and yes, and it was such a special feeling just to have so much in common with these people I knew nothing about. So I filled out a card asking for more information. And it was incredible because there was a woman who was living on my street about 6 or 7 houses away, and she was a Baha'i. And so she said, come on over, we're having a barbecue, and we can talk more about the questions that you have. So I visited, and there were a lot of Baha'is there, but there were also tons of junior youth. And I didn't have any context about what was going on, but I remember like 30 teenagers running around, and I didn't know what was happening. And they were doing a service project. And so they recruited me right away. I showed up and they got me working. And I remember just like learning a lot from these people, and they were so kind. I asked, how do I learn more and what can I do? And they said that they invited me to join one of the Ruhi circles. And we ended up doing a Ruhi circle on campus. It was me and 2 friends who were both Baha'is, and we met at the university library. After that, I was graduating and I was going to law school. And I was going to law school in Oregon. And so I was eager to meet the Baha'is of this new community. There was a Baha'i center right next to campus. And so I went and visited them one Sunday, and I told them that I've been investigating the faith in Arizona and I'd like to learn more. And I remember it was a bit of a respite and a solace from the rest of law school, because law school was very stressful, and it was just a very welcoming place to go every single week. And I think it was special coming here to DC every summer, because there were a lot more Baha'is who were my age, who were passionate about a lot of the same things that I'm interested in. So to see how their values translates into their work was very special for me. I was very interested in learning about the faith and serving alongside Baha'is, but I think I hesitated to actually become a Baha'i. And I remember the reason for it is, it sounds very silly now, but it was very much being so awed and impressed, not just with the community and the writings, but also Baha'u'llah's exhortations for the individual, and striving for such a high standard. I was so impressed, but I felt very much like I couldn't meet that standard, and so I thought, maybe a few years after I'm done with law school, I'll think about that. I had a close friend in Eugene, Oregon, and he was this elderly Native American man, and he had been a Baha'i much of his life, and he was extremely generous, both in teaching me a lot about the faith, but also sending me books, and he would send me books and books and books. Every time he saw me, he would give me another book, and even when I came here to DC, he would mail me books, and he was so incredibly kind, and I feel like I have a whole library of Baha'i books because of him. When I returned to Oregon, he once sat down with me and he said, "What's taking you so long?" And he was very direct about it, which was very different from my experience in exploring the faith, because one of the really special things about the Baha'i community is it never felt like there was this pressure to become a Baha'i. Like, that wasn't the point. The point was to help contribute to the unity of humanity and build unified communities. So then when he asked me, it kind of threw me off, but then I really got thinking about it, and we had a long conversation about this concern that I had, and he totally shot it down, and he talked about how we're all imperfect, and that's not the point, and that there can be such benefit and beauty in committing and to join this large family almost of people from around the world of such diverse backgrounds. And I'm so glad that he asked me, because just a few months later he passed away. He was quite elderly, and that was such a beautiful gift, one for him to teach me so much, but also to encourage me to become a Baha'i. It hasn't felt like that was the end of a journey, but very much like the whole beginning of a very long journey of improving myself at the individual level, but also contributing to unity and love in my communities. My parents were actually very supportive. In fact, they attended some devotionals themselves in Tucson, Arizona, and they also attended the Bicentenary. My sister's also been very supportive, and she's attended many Baha'i gatherings with me, and that's something that's very special. My father had a story because he knew about the Baha'is well before I did. But apparently when he was young, he moved to a town near his home. And apparently around the time that he moved to the town, some Baha'is moved to the town. and everyone was talking about them because they were doing one service project that kind of amazed everyone. And it was they would wake up every morning at dawn and they would sweep the main boulevard of the city. And he was thoroughly impressed, and so was everyone else. And I thought that was a really sweet story. It doesn't matter your past. If your heart is searching, the answer will come to you like a breeze.